Hi everyone, welcome to Thorrk Hot Takes, and today we are going to talk about everything there is to know about StarCraft the Miniature Games on the gameplay side of things. So on the last Ask Me Anything, Archon Studio showed us the starter set, showed us all the miniatures, and the game looked absolutely amazing. But what about the gameplay? You're probably wondering from a gameplay standpoint, is the game gonna be good? Because obviously it doesn't really matter how good those miniatures are, we also want to have a good game as well. And it turns out that there's actually a lot of information out there about the gameplay of StarCraft. It's just that it's spread across so many different parts. You have to really basically puzzle together all the information that is out there, and it's exactly what I did for you in this video. You watch this video and you know everything there that we know so far about the gameplay of this game. So let's move on here to the video by the basic here. So in the basics, obviously, StarCraft the Miniature War Game will be a 32mm scale war game with army that are about 30 to 60 model on each side, depending of course on the army. Of course, you're playing Protoss, you're gonna have lots of units. If you're playing Zerg, you're gonna have a lot more. And 32mm scale is about the same scale as Warhammer 40k. So the two games are, at least on the surface level, a bit comparable to each other. So I'll make a few parallels between the two games. But you're gonna see as we get into deeper and deeper this video that they are actually quite different from one another. So they use a d6 dice and inches ruler. I guess you can use centimeters as well, but all the games is gonna be in inch and feet. So that's what it is. And the recommended size for a game is 2,000 points, and basically games last for about 2 hours, which is about 1 hour less than a game of Warhammer 40k, which is on average about 3 hours. So a bit more streamlined, a bit shorter than 40k. So it's very welcome. The game is going to be separated, so each round is going to be separated in 3 phases: the movement, the assault, and the close combat phase. And units activate alternatively. So you basically activate one unit, your opponent activates one unit, and so on and so forth until all units have been activated, or when both players have decided to pass. So this is obviously very different from Warhammer 40k, where you play your entire army and your opponent plays an entire army as well. But I gotta say that most modern war games nowadays use the alternative activation system. Because it's obviously way more interactive. It makes it so you don't have to wait your turn for 20 minutes, and it also makes the game more strategic, as you have to really think about not what you're going to do with your units, but also when you're going to do it, as opposed to whenever you play your entire army, you kind of do things all at once, and it doesn't really matter. So it also makes game less one-sided, that if, let's say, your opponent has a massive shooting phase and wipes your entire army, this cannot happen in this game because it's going to be more back and forth. And basically during each of those 3 phases, every unit can perform one action. So we'll get into more details about this very soon. So just want to let you know that among everything I'm going to show you today, nothing is final. This is part of like the beta rules. And those, a lot of those rules might already been outdated, but unfortunately we don't know anything more. And there's also going to be further beta testing happening for the game until the launch. So obviously nothing that I'm going to show you today is final. So don't start to go like, oh, seems imbalanced or anything like this, because nothing in there is final. So the first big unique aspect of StarCraft is going to be the supply system. So the way it works is that there are actually no deployment. Unit comes into play from the reserve, so from outside of the game, and they enter the game by moving in there, and basically what determines how many units you can have on the field is the supply system. So every unit has a supply stats, which is usually going to be 1 or 2, and then on the first turn of the game, you're gonna have about 50% of your army which is going to enter play. So for example, it's only an example. Let's say your entire army is worth 14 supply. Well, on the first turn of the game, you're going to have 7 supplies entering play. And they're not going to enter play all at once. They're going to enter play as they get activated. So once again, back and forth system. Every turn, you get more supply. which allow you to add more units from the reserve. So let's say on turn, you can have 7 supply on turn 1, but then on turn 2 you might get 9 supplies. So you already have 7 supply on the board. That means you can add an additional unit worth 2 supplies to the game. But it also means that whenever you lose a unit, it does free up your supply. So let's say you have a unit worth 1 supply getting killed on turn 1. Then that means on turn 2, instead of entering 1 unit worth 2 supplies, you can maybe enter 1 unit that is worth 2 and 1 unit that is worth 1. So basically, the more troops you lose early on, the sooner you'll be able to make your reserve enter play. And that's a very, very cool system, because it creates a sort of a comeback mechanic. As you're losing more units, you get to have more reinforcement. I mean, at least this reinforcement will come back sooner, will come into play sooner than for your opponent. And this allows you to come back into the game if you get a very bad start, and it avoids the snowball effect that can happen in war games when you start killing stuff, and obviously you're in a better position, you have more units on the board, and it snowballs into a win, into a very early win. Well, at least, yes, your opponent has killed more units, but at least you're gonna have the same amount of troops on the battlefield. You're gonna have the same amount of supply on the battlefield, at least in the first 3 or 4 turns in the game. So every turn starts with the initiative to determine who is going to have the initiative. And on this, it's very simple, is whoever has the fewest victory points chooses who gets the initiative at the beginning of the round. And if there's a tie, both players will basically roll a d6 and whoever has the highest wins. So obviously on the first turn of the game, nobody has victory points, so you roll a d6. But then on subsequent turn, the initiative can pass over to the other player, depending on who has the fewest victory points. So obviously, objective will allow you to score victory points throughout the game. So this is another comeback mechanic that obviously if you are in a bad spot, you haven't scored a lot of points, you will have the advantage of being able to choose who goes first, which can be pretty significant. And I really like this because it's once again another comeback mechanic that's going to make games less snowbally and more fun. The next phase is going to be the movement phase. And during the movement phase, units can perform one of 3 different actions. The first action, the one you're going to be using 99% of the time, is the move action. It just allows you to move your units. Then there's going to be the disengage action, that if your unit is engaged in close combat, it can actually move away from close combat. But there's going to be a restriction, is like whenever you make a disengage action, you cannot make range attack or charge action on the next round during the assault phase. So that's a pretty big deal. So you can't just disengage and then shoot on the next phase. You can disengage to allow all the units though to shoot at the target, or you can of course disengage to prevent your opponent from fighting you. And then there's going to be the re-engage action, which is basically means you have 2 units that are engaged in close combat, but some miniatures in your squads are not in base-to-base contact. With a re-engage action, you can actually make sure that more miniatures in your squads can actually be in base-to-base combat. And that's fairly important because only units that are in base-to-base contact can actually fight and can actually attack. So the first player who passes gets the initiative for the next phase. So you can choose to not activate a unit to pass faster. So the way that works is you can say, okay, I have this unit that I could move, but I prefer to have the initiative on the next round. I will not activate this unit and I will pass faster, because it's whoever passed the first will get the initiative on the next round, which is going to be a pretty big advantage, as we will see. And then third, you can also claim terrain to, I think it's supposed to help you hide better, I guess. So the way that works is units at 1 inch of a terrain, and that allows you to increase the size of the terrain, and increasing the size of terrains will allow you to protect your unit behind it. So, not sure exactly how that's gonna work, but this is kind of what I understood from the little summary. So the sheet that you're seeing here is the official rules that were basically described at Essen when they were doing demo games. So obviously those are very summary rules, so they don't contain any details. And they are obviously beta rules as well that are subject to change, and probably quite outdated version of those rules. But at least it gives us an idea of what the game is about. So during the movement phase, what is very interesting is that whenever you are moving a squad, you actually don't move all the models in the squad. You basically designate what we call a leading model. You move that unit up to maximum movement speed. You can move less, but no more than the maximum movement speed of the unit, which is going to be described on the unit card. And then after you move that leading model, you can move all the other models of the squads to as far as you want, as long as they stay within 3 inches of the leading model. So the way that works, so let's say you have this unit of roaches here, so you're going to be designated, let's say, the unit here in front as the leading model. You're going to move that model to the maximum movement range, which is 4 inches. And then the 2 other models can actually move, can be placed around the model anywhere at 3 inches. That means you can place them further. So this unit, even though it has a maximum speed of 4 inches, but because you move the last model here forward, it actually kind of moves 7 inches. So as long as you have multiple miniatures in the squad, you can actually move further than your maximum movement distance using that method. So it's a little bit weird if you come from other wargame, but I guess this was a way to simplify movement. So you only have to really be careful with the movement of one unit, and then the other card, and then the other miniatures can be placed relatively easily. So I think it's been made in order to simplify the movement, and I think it's going to be very handy, especially with a squad that have that have a lot of models in them. So next we're going to get into probably the most important phase of the game. This is going to be the assault phase. So during the assault phase, a miniature can do one of the 4 following actions. It can move again, so a unit can move both in the movement and during the assault phase. So double movement means it's basically running, right? It can make a range attack, so shooting, basically. So for shooting, it's kind of classic war game. You need to be line of sight. Your weapons needs to be in range. Then you have to roll to hit, and then every hit your opponent has to save them with the potential armor that they have. They can charge, or they can make a defensive attack. So charging basically means attacking, moving a unit to close combat, to base close combat. And when the charge happens, you actually don't deal any damage. The attack is actually done during the next phase, which is the close combat phase. And then lastly, there's going to be a defensive attack. So defensive attack means whenever someone charges you, you can actually activate your unit to shoot against the unit that charged you. So the advantage of this is that normally you can't make a range attack whenever you engage in combat. So this allows you that if someone charges one of a unit that hasn't been activated and that unit gets charged, this unit will still have an opportunity to shoot. Obviously, there's 2 restrictions. It can only shoot at the unit that is charging it, so that obviously limits your impact. Let's say you want to protect a queen, and so you use your Zergling to charge a group of marine. The marines now are forced to attack the Zerglings, while they would have wanted maybe to attack the queen, for example. And the other restriction is that the unit that you're shooting at is going to have an evade roll, which is an extra armor save that they have that can actually make them be more survivable. So it is a restriction, but at least you get to shoot even if you get attacked, you get charged before you were activated. And I think that's the only action in the game that we've seen so far that is done in reaction to something else. So, just like for the movement phase, the first player who passes gets the initiative for the next phase, and you can choose to not activate the unit to pass faster. So a couple of other things about the assault phase. The charge distance is basically your movement value plus a d6, so you get an extra movement speed whenever you're charging, but this movement speed bonus is a bit random. So that means if you charge, you can try to charge something that is beyond your movement speed value, but if you fail your charge, but if your die roll does not allow you to go further, then the charge is cancelled and you've activated for nothing. This is probably the only rule in the game that I personally don't like. I don't like having such an important part of the game being linked to a single die roll. Yeah, it's at least it's less random than in Warhammer 40k. In Warhammer 40k, the charge are 2d6, which is even more random. So and also Archon Studios has confirmed that the close combat units will have some sort of way, optional, but you will have some sort of ways to re-roll those dice so to make them more reliable. Also, compared to 40k, there's no roll to wound. It's you roll to hit and then there's a save. There's no roll to wound in this game, so it's a little bit simpler. Also, most weapons have what we call a surge bonus against certain type of units. So they have something like surge heavy or surge light. So that means if your unit attack against a light unit, for example, you will get to have a certain amount of successful hits converted so they can ignore armor. So let's say you have surge D3 versus light. Well, you will be able to roll a D6. So a D3 is basically D6 divided by 2. And then you get, let's say you roll a 4, so that's 2. And that means you get to 2 of your hits will ignore armor. So this is a mechanic that is basically created in order to emphasize the rock, paper, scissors nature of StarCraft. Basically, in the video games, certain good units are good against certain others. So this will help basically simulate that. Another cool thing about this is that the surge bonus is a flat bonus. So it doesn't matter how many models there's in a squad, the surge bonus is always the same. So that means that basically, relative to the amount of model that they have, smaller unit will actually be more dangerous than unit with a lot of models in them. Which I think is done in order to, once again, create those kind of comeback mechanic where if you can still have very small units and still have them dealing some pretty good damage, assuming once again you are shooting against something that you have a bonus against. Other thing is like you cannot shoot a unit that is engaged in combat, and there's no real life line of sight. You're not gonna have to bend across the battlefield to see if you are seeing a unit. Basically, the game uses a base to assess the size of your unit on the board, and to assess how tall the unit is. There's a size stat that is basically on the unit card. So it's gonna make games less subjective than what they are in 40k, for example, and it will also allow you to convert your unit to however fancy base or fancy stuff without getting a disadvantage in the game. Also, just like in the video game, certain units can only attack ground or air. So that's going to be on the unit stats. So if you have an air unit and your close combat, you won't be able to attack air unit and stuff like this. So getting now to the combat phase where we are resolving the close combat that is happening. During this phase, units can only perform one action, and that's the close combat attack action, and that's basically just using the stats of your melee weapons to basically attack the unit. Units also, not all units, but most units also get a bonus when they charge, which we'll get over later on. But basically, that's basically it. And they can only attack with their close combat weapons. So when a unit is attacking close combat, as opposed to other games like Warhammer 40k, the unit does not retaliate immediately. Basically, you're gonna have to activate that unit to be able to attack. So let's say a Zergling has charged you, and the Zerg player has the initiative. It will be able to resolve the attack of the Zergling against the Marines, and the Marines will not retaliate right away. You will have to wait to activate those Marines to be able to fight back. That means that sometimes group of squad can simply just attack you and kill you before you get the chance to retaliate. So that's a bit cutthroaty, to say the least, but once again, thanks to the defensive range attack, you will be able to shoot with your units when they get charged. So in one hand, yeah, they might not be able to retaliate in close combat, but they might be able to deal some serious damage by shooting when the unit is attacking them. So, and the last thing that is important is like only the models in base-to-base contact will be able to perform a close combat attack. So that means that this extra d6 of movement that you get when you charge, if you get a high enough number, you will allow to put more models in base-to-base contact, which mean more models that can actually fight. So now that we went over the main phases of the game, let's take over the different keywords and different special rules that we currently know about. So for example, the anti-evade will basically allow you to ignore a certain amount of evade roll, which, as I said, every miniatures has an evade save and an armor save. The armor save is the one that you always have. The evade save is only a save that you get under very specific circumstances. So for example, whenever you're doing a defensive shooting attack while being charged, you get the evade save, while the anti-evade will allow you to ignore those. The blast basically allow you to, whenever you shoot at a model, you actually have an AoE, an area of effect of a certain distance around the unit that's been targeted, around the model that's been targeted, and all the models that will be within that zone will be affected. So that's basically for explosive weapons. Impact hits is basically the bonus that you get whenever you're charging, so you get to do extra attacks depending on your impact hits stats, but those are only resolved on the 5+. So this basically gives you an extra bonus whenever you're charging. Long range allow you to shoot with your weapons beyond the maximum range attack of the weapon. However, whenever you do this, you get a -1 to hit modifier. So that means if you hit on 3+, you'll be hitting on the 4+ at long range. So that means there's a disadvantage at shooting something from far away, which I think is very good. I think it's really good to encourage players to try to get nice and close to get the maximum potential of their power. And as opposed to people who want to stay on the back and shoot, they can still do so, but they will get a modifier if they shoot from long distance. Bulky basically means that the weapons cannot perform a defensive attack action, which is the action that you get whenever you're being attacked, whenever you're being charged, that you won't be able to shoot back if your weapon is bulky. Non-lethal wounds is basically saying that you get wounds, but those wounds don't apply right away. They will apply in addition to additional wound that you receive. So basically it amplifies the next time you get a wound. So let's say you have non-lethal wound 3. Next time, let's say a weapon deals you 2 wounds, well, you will now have 5 wounds for the next time you get. So that's a disadvantage, basically. Specialist means you can only have one of such weapons per squads, per unit. The sidearm means that you can shoot that weapon in addition to your primary weapon. And the surge, we already talked about it. This is what allows you to get specific bonus against specific kinds of unit. So now let's go over like a typical unit card. So here, of course, I took the most iconic and basic unit in the game, the good old Terran Marine. So the speed is the amount of inches that this unit moves whenever it performs a move action. Evade is, as we said, is a special save that only can be used in special circumstances. The armor save is the regular saves of the squad. The wounds is basically the amount of HP the unit has. So whenever the wounds goes to 0, you lose a model. So weapons will deal a certain amount of damage. So when a weapon deals 1 damage, you take 1 wound off, and so on. And the size is basically how tall the miniature is, basically. So how easy is it going to be to hide behind terrains, for example. The squad size, the amount of models in the squad. So you see there's 2 numbers, so you can either get a squad of 6 Marines or a squad of 9 Marines. And if you take a squad of 6 Marines, it will be worth 1 supply. And if you take a unit of 9 Marines, it will be worth 2 supplies. So then you got special abilities. So whenever there's a little arrow here, it means that this is an optional ability that you can upgrade, but then you have to spend points. You have to spend minerals to be able to get that additional weapons. So if this doesn't have an arrow, that means it's a default thing. So you got it as a base value from just getting the unit. But if it's an arrow, that means you have to buy it, basically. So you get the shield to improve your armor. You get the grenade frag in order to reduce impact hits, so it makes the charge of your opponent less effective. You get the Thorrk thrower, which allows you to have anti-evade. It makes, for example, shooting with making defensive attack more potent, for example, or any other unit that might be able to benefit from evade save. They also have the steam pack. So steam pack has the barracks keyword next to it. That means in order to get these special rules, you need to have a barracks as your tactical cards. We'll get over tactical cards later on, but basically it doesn't cost points to have that upgrade, but it requires you to have a tactical part. cards. And tactical cards are worth can be bought with Vespene gas. We'll get over that later on. So this basically allows you, just like in the video game, you basically taking non-lethal wounds, which as we know we amplify next time you take wounds, and that will allow you to improve the speed of the unit so they can move faster and they can reroll their failed hits, so they will hit harder. What is really, really cool about the unit card is that basically each ability is literally placed in the phase that is relevant to them. So here, the Steam Pack can only be used as an active ability during the movement phase. So that's something that you know from this. So during the assault phase, obviously this is where you can shoot, and that's where the stats of your weapons is placed. So the basic weapons has a range of 12, so you can shoot out of 12 inches. You get to roll 2 dice, and you hit on a 4+. And each successful hit will deal 1 damage to the squad that you're attacking. It also has a surge bonus against light units. So we see there's little traits at the there's little tags at the bottom of the unit. So Marines are also light, ground, biological Terran units. So this one gives you a special D3 of ignoring armor if you're fighting against the light units. It can target ground and air units, and you can shoot that weapon at long range up to 18 inches. But if you do so, you will only hit on a 5+ instead of 4+. Really cool. You can upgrade these weapons to an AGG 12, which is basically the same thing but rolls an extra dice. As the surge against armored instead of light, can only shoot ground, and is a specialist weapon. That means only one Marine in the squad can be equipped with that. And then there's also the grenade launcher, which is really cool as it's roll d6 dice, so the amount of attack depends on the d6. So you roll a dice, you get 3. That means you're rolling 3 dice. Hits on 4+, and then you got a bunch of different stuff. It's surge against light. It attacks ground. Long range 18, specialist, blast. So it has an area of effect, and it's also a bulky weapon, so it cannot be used for defensive attack. And as a sidearm, that means you can shoot it on top of your gun. So let's say the Marines here, they can wear those grenade launchers. They're wearing their grenade launchers on their shoulder pads. So those weapons will be represented on the miniature, and they can basically shoot those and shoot with their gun at the same time. So during the combat phase, the only thing that you get to know is how good is the Marine at fighting in close combat. And for this, they just use their fist, and they have the strike thing. They roll 1 dice, they hit on 5+, deal 1 damage. That's obviously not very good, but you can upgrade this to a bayonet, and in which case you will basically roll twice more dice, and you will have a slight bonus against light units. So this is a pretty good example of a unit card. I think everything here is pretty intuitive. It's very nice that the upgrades are directly on the cards. So everything is in there. You don't have to, you just have all that information about the unit. Everything there is to know about it is just well regrouped in one card, which I think is awesome. And it's going to make it very, very easy to play. And it's also very well organized. And it's not, I don't think it's not overwhelming the amount of information you have. So now let's get into the army building rules. How do you actually build your army in StarCraft the Miniature Game? So the way it works, the first you're going to have to choose your race and then choose your faction. In StarCraft, you got 3 races, the Zerg, the Protoss, and the Terran. But within each of those races, there's going to be a multitude of factions. They said at release that there will be 3 factions per race. So here we only know 2 of them. For the Terran, for example, this is just an example. You got the Reyna's Raiders, and you got the Terran Combined Arms. So basically, faction gives you access to special ability, special units, and so there's going to be some units which are common to all Terrans that any Terran faction can take, and there's going to be specific units that only specific faction will be able to take. And then what your faction does, it also gives you access to what unit slots you have available. And basically the unit slot will tell you what kind of models you can actually pick in your armies. So here, for example, the Raiders Rainer, you can get 1 air unit, no elite, 1 support, 3 cores, and 1 hero. And the Terran Arm, they don't have a hero slot, but instead they have an elite slot. So basically the core are probably your basic infantry, the hero are your special characters, The support are the units that are not really meant to fight, but more like support the rest of your army. The elite are your strongest unit or your biggest unit, and then the air are specifically the air units. I really like that the air unit is basically a specific unit slot because it means you won't be able to spam air unit, for example, which can really create a negative experience because then obviously there's going to be some units that can't shoot air, so will be excluded from the game. So the reason why we have those unit slots is to basically prevent players from spamming the same unit over and over again. There will be 3 factions per races at launch according to Archon Studio. So this is an example of the different ability that you can have if you select a certain faction. So here's Rainer's Raider will have 2 special ability. They will have the ability to deploy a point defense drone anywhere on the table. We don't really know what the point defense drone does, but in a video game, it allows to absorb a certain type of range attack, so it's a defensive ability. And then the other ability is called Ready to Pick Up and will allow you to completely redeploy a ground unit from one side of the table to a completely different place. And what is very strong is that you can do this as an action, so you can say, let's see, you can use this during the movement phase, and that means that during the next phase, the shooting phase, you'll be able to shoot. So this will be instead of your movement, but then you can shoot right away, or you can charge right away. So that can be an extremely powerful ability, but it's only once per game. So next we're going to have the army building rules. So the way that works is that you have to choose your budget, obviously, with your opponents. So let's say you want to build an army, you want to play a big battle or you play small battles. It depends on the size of battle. The standard game size that Archon Studio is advising is 2,000 points, and points in this game are called minerals. And you're going to be spending minerals to purchase units in your army. So it will allow you to purchase units, but also upgrades. And you can also have more models in the squad. So for example, the Marauders, you can either have a squad of 2 or you can get a squad of 4. So you got 140 points if you only take one squad of 2, takes 260 if you want 4 models in your squad. You can do this with Marines. So you can upgrade the amount of models in your squad, but it's very limited. You can't do it whatever you want. It's very, I think for balance reason, I believe, is that they made it very restrictive. So the other side of the army building rules is basically selecting your tactical cards. So in this case, you buy them with what we call Vespene gas, and your budget in Vespene gas is basically equal 10% of your mineral budget. So if your standard game size is going to be 200 gas. And with this budget, you are basically going to be buying any amount of tactical cards that you want as long as you have the budget for it. And so tactical cards are worth certain amounts. Tactical cards basically provide special abilities and also unlock additional new unit slots. So let's say you're buying an armory, you get an extra elite slot. That means you'll be able to put an extra elite unit in your army, according, of course, assuming you got enough points to put in there. So this is a good example of what a tactical card looks like. As you can see, it has special ability that allows him to whenever you exhaust an ability on another tactical card, you can exhaust this card instead. So that will allow you to reuse activated ability of other cards. It also has the creep spread ability, which allows you to place a creep tumor basically near your entry point. Entry point is kind of your deployment zone, is where you need to basically come from. And this tactical card costs 30 Vespene gas and is unique, meaning you cannot have multiple of them. So we don't know what the creep is gonna do, but in the video game, creeps allows your Zerg unit to move faster. So now the last part of the game that we haven't covered yet that is very important in wargaming is the missions and the objective. As you know, you don't only win the game by eliminating the enemy units, you also have to score points throughout the game. And we have a couple of examples here of what the missions are currently looking like. Once again, it's all subject to change. But the deployment, this is basically what we call a deployment scheme. So that's basically how you are going to be deploying. And it's very cool because those deployments map have names of famous StarCraft 2 maps. So it's kind of cool as well that they've added that. So here you got basically your entry zone, which is basically where your units are going to be entering from. And at the middle here, you got the objectives that you're going to be placing on the battlefield. This is another example of a deployment zone. This one is called Acropolis, which is another famous StarCraft 2 map. And the way that works is, so I can see here, this creates a very completely different game because you can make your units enter on either two opposite corners, and your opponent can do two. So it's a bit more chaotic. You don't only have one army against another. It's a bit more chaotic. So you see, a very simple things like this can really make the game a lot more replayable and really change the way you play the game. And again, you get the different configurations here of objectives. And basically, they also showed us one mission that they've envisioned for the game. It's called Supply Drop. And the way that works is that at the beginning of every turn, we're gonna be randomly selecting a control points to take control of. And if you take control of it, you're gonna be scoring points. And the amount of points that you're scoring for controlling that objective at the end of the round is going to be equivalent to the round number. So at the beginning, they're not worth, they're only worth 1 point, but then on turn 2, they're worth 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, and on the last turn of the game, which is apparently round 5, the control point 5 is going to be the one that's going to be activated, and this one will score you for 5 points. So it's a very interesting system that will force you to kind of have a lot of map presence and be a little bit everywhere on the map, and being able to move and maneuver your units in different areas of the map. Also, we have some 2 numbers at the bottom here. The number 6 represents the amount of supply that you're going to have at the beginning of the game. So here is 6. So most units in the game either are worth 1 or 2. Usually the large units are worth 2, the smaller units are worth 1. So that means you can actually have about half of your army at the beginning of the game. And then every round, there's going to be 2 additional supplies that comes into play every round. So if there's 5 rounds, that means in the end, you can have up to 16 supplies on the battlefield. If this is ever something that is, I don't even know if it's possible to get 16 supply in an army, but that's how it works basically. So I'm assuming maybe by like turn 4 or 5, you should have your entire army on the battlefield. Yeah, so basically there's also notable rules that Archon Studio have talked about. For now, the terrain rules are very, very simple. Basically, terrains are just here to block line of sight and obviously block movement. They don't actually give you what we call a cover save in other game, which is an extra save for being protected. They just are here to block the line of sight, so you can either shoot at a unit or you can't. There's no middle ground, at least for now. The map size for a standard game is going to be 6 by 3 feet, so that's basically roughly 1.8 meters by 1 meters. So that's basically about, obviously the battlefield can be smaller for smaller battles. So just by comparison, a battle, if a map for a table size for Warhammer 40k is going to be 6 by 4 feet. So this is going to be a little bit smaller, so you can fit this better. To be honest, I always found that the 6 by 4 feet was an absolute headache, because there's actually no table that is 6 by 4. You always, it's actually not easy to find 6 by 4 tables. 6 by 3, much more common table size from my experience. Another thing as well is that there's no moral system in the game. There's no such thing as units basically being flying in terror and just retreating and stuff like this. That's something that is not in the video game, so they've decided to not implement it in the miniature game either, even though it is kind of a standard for most war games to have. But I think it's actually something that might make the game a lot simpler without making it worse, which I think is a good call. Another thing is, like, obviously there's going to be invisible unit in the game, like unit that we call they are cloaked. And the way they work is, like, it's not like in the video games where if you don't have detection, you can't shoot them you can't attack them at all. You can shoot or charge cloaked unit, but the way that works is that you can only shoot at them if they are within 6 inches of you. So they have to be very close of you for them to shoot. And whenever you shoot at them, you also have they're going to benefit from an evade save. They're going to be able to benefit from that. Obviously, that's assuming you shoot at them without detection. If you have detection, then you can shoot at them just like any other unit in the game. And that's it. That's pretty much everything we know about the rules of StarCraft. So I hope this video gives you a better idea of whether this game is for you or not. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything I said that I got wrong, or let me know if there's any additional rules that were basically talked about by Archon Studio that I didn't cover in this video. I took a lot of information from a lot of different sources to put this video together, so I hope you guys will appreciate, and I'll see you next time for another video about the StarCraft miniature game. See you next time.